How you doing, everybody? My name is Paul Ormond, and this is my podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to a good friend of mine named Will Everett. He is a finance expert. He's got a background in marketing, or sorry, in business analytics, and he's an MBA and a chartered accountant, and all those kinds of wonderful things. And we're going to be talking about the wide world of metrics and why it matters. This is something I've struggled with for a while too, is trying to do, market my own stuff on the internet. And I think I've had a lot of ups and downs, and the journey has been filled with, I would say a lot of revelations about how this kind of thing works, and how you can, how numbers can work for you and how they can work against you, and why they matter. So I'm going to be talking to Will about how these things, how you can use this kind of stuff, and what is really important to look at when you're thinking about numbers, especially when it comes to these online marketing campaigns, which for a lot of people can be a difficult thing, and a difficult thing to get your head around. I know that this is something that I've struggled with as well. So I'm looking forward to talking with him about it, and we're going to jump over to him right now. All right, and we're live with Will Everett. How you doing, buddy?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Will, I guess you're coming off. We're gonna come. We've known each other for a while, but we can call you. You're a finance expert. Now, how does one become a finance expert in this day and age?
Sure, I guess you could call me a finance expert. It all started, well, you and I met at university, and I went to university taking criminology because I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Halfway through university, decided that business was more of my passion, and so stopped pursuing a legal career and decided to work at the bank. I worked for the Bank of Nova Scotia in account management, and then went and did my MBA, and then did my CA through PricewaterhouseCoopers, and have worked in corporate lending with the banks and in finance now in Toronto. So that's sort of my career path from 30,000 feet.
30 coming out like that. I think everyone's taking these kinds of journeys too. So, what specifically attracted you to finance? Because you may obviously you thought your life was going to be going one way, and then, like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this at all. So, what was it that drew you towards it?
Surprisingly, it's not really about math. Everyone thinks, finance, you have to be very great, advanced math, and be a 98% math student when you're in high school and university, and take all the complex courses. But I think it's more about your passion for the general principles and the details and the numbers, and learning what makes companies tick, and why there's a relationship between the financial statements, why accounts move this way or that way, and the interrelationships between them. If you understand those basic principles, you can really understand where a company needs value, where a company adds value, and where a company is hurting or exceeding expectations. And that's none of that is complicated math, and none of that is complicated principles, really. It's just getting used to understanding the relationships between the drivers for those changes.
And then that's really what it is too. I think you're seeing a lot of this kind of stuff now, where even a common person is confronting these kinds of ideas all the time, where these numbers are all, because so many people now, everyone's got a side hustle, everyone's got something in the game, or trying to do something. I don't think I know very few people that don't have them now, right? So we're
Yeah.
all kind of immersed in these numbers, and things are getting kicked around. So, like, I mean, when you start looking at that, I think I can see how that's like, as the detective work that goes into like piecing this together, right? So I
Yeah. I
find
mean,
that. Go ahead, sir.
I think you raise an interesting point. I think a lot of people are intimidated by what to do as an entrepreneur, uh, owning a one person business, and trying to figure out how to organize your books or your accounting software, or build a financial forecast, or approach a bank, or approach an investor. It's a very difficult concept to grasp at the onset. Maybe not so difficult as it is intimidating, but and everyone says, it must be so much more difficult to do this for a huge company. And I think it's not really the case. Really, the principles are the same. And if you can do it for a big company, you can do it for a small company. If you can do it for a small company, you can do it for a big company. And it really comes down to the data and the discipline to collect the data and organize it in a succinct way. So you're always going to need to find out what your strengths are as a business, put those thoughts down, and then you can start crafting a financial model and a financial business case. And it's not that difficult to start down the path. You just need to put pen to paper.
I think that's really true too. When you started saying, when you hit on the thing that like a big company and a small company are still dealing with the same kind of stuff, right? It's like, even though, Apple is, I mean, any of these guys are huge, they're still accessing they're still marketing, they're still moving through the same portals. So it's like, I mean, looking at the stuff that I'm doing, I know that my competitors are these giant companies, but my stuff is dropping in right next to them, and then they're getting the same feedback that I'm getting as well, right? So
yeah, I mean, you're still going to have your revenue from your sources, and those are going to add up to your top line, and you're still going to have your expenses. If you're a one person entrepreneur and you have your 5 expense line items versus a huge company who has 30 expense line items, it's the work you do in a spreadsheet or an accounting software system is the same. You amalgamate all those items and they drop down to create your net profit. And at the end of the day, do you have a successful business or not? And then in behind the revenue line item, you have all of your marketing efforts that pay off to get you a top line that's going to grow or is forecasted to grow. And then that becomes a question of why and how can you use data that is out there to help you grow that number. And that's where the marketing efforts and the more modern analytics through click rates and determining which areas are of interest to your end user are really important in honing in on and getting right.
And I think that's it. Like, it really is. There's that analytics that come into kind of mining out that data. It's like, so again, and that brings us to that one of those key buzzwords, which is metrics. And like, so if, like I said, I mean, most of these, like I said, most people are coming at it from a layman's term and just like kind of there's not one of us that aren't jumping onto our Facebook feeds, our Instagram, and you're seeing these sponsored ads showing up and somebody's just up in there clicking buttons away. Right now, where if you're going to look at something like that, if you were to take one person who's trying to sell one product, what were the first things that you would try and do to be able to get some workable numbers so that you could be able to put together a marketing campaign or to be able to have an establishment of where they should even be marketing? Where do you start there?
You got to know who your end user is and really focus on what pleases that end user. So is there a need that you're satisfying for, or a need or a want that you're satisfying for your end user, and understanding what that definition is really going to be the start of your sales path. Because if you're selling a sci-fi book and you know that a certain demographic of people in this certain area are interested in that kind of a book, and you know the keywords that they look up to find that kind of a book, that's your marketing strategy right there. But it involves working backwards to find that demographic. Why do they want it? What do they look up when they're trying to find it? And then how can I present my material to them that way? And so that's the way to really start to gain traction for your own entrepreneurial business. If you're just a one-person shop getting going, you really need to define who your ultimate user is and what is the want or the need that you're satisfying for them, and how can you do that?
No, I think that's really true too, because you can't really, if you just make something and then you try and figure out who to market it to, that you're completely lost in the woods, right? It's like you're never going to be able to.
That can be very challenging. Yeah, because there's so many channels to use and there's so many buzzwords, and it would take an extreme amount of trial and error to get the right one. You could be wasting a lot of marketing dollars on a buzzword that you might think is right, and it's coming nowhere near what your end user or your intended end user is searching for, because you haven't done the end user studies to find out what it is that they want and how they're trying to consume that product.
That's true. That, and I think that it's been one of those things. I think a lot of people, and I can see it. I mean, I see a lot of misplaced, Facebook ads showing up in my feed too. Like, there's no way that I'm going to be wanting to market. Why are you marketing this to me at all? Right? You can, like I said, I know that this is a mistake that I've made as well too, because I've picked the wrong stuff. I mean, I think we talked about it before too. I was talking about this, even just different variations of keywords can have radically different effects across the thing.
Yeah.
You're not even sure.
And I don't think that a mistake is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, trial and error is a very good way to solve a problem, because if you don't ultimately know what the keywords are, there is going to have to be some trial and error that goes into determining what is the best way to find this end consumer. And then coming with trial and error is documenting it and analyzing it for yourself, so you know where not to repeat the same mistakes over again, or where you are gaining traction from a keyword that wasn't so successful before. And if you start building your own database, say you use keyword X through Q1 of 2020, and you were using keyword Y through Q2 of 2020, and you start mapping your analytics and see who was clicking on those keywords, how many seconds users were staying on that website for, and how many click-through rates were happening because of those certain keywords, and then documenting all of those differences over time, you're going to build your own analytics very easily on what is working for you or not. And then it'll show it graphically for you once you have the discipline to record it every month or every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. I think I think that one of the things that I've for me personally, having been one of these idiots out there launching a sponsored keyword or whatever kind of, I've done ads across a number of different platforms, and some have been wildly like, wow, that cost a lot of money, and some have been like done nothing, and I've seen all of these kinds of things come across too. But I find that it's the idea of building and maintaining a sustained campaign has been one of the most terrifying things for me. Is that you do need months and months of data, and it's like, how am I supposed to be able to like go and like, without that kind of stuff, and without, like, if I'm going to be launching something from so when you start looking at this kind of stuff, how can you tell if an ad is successful after a while? Like, what is something you're gonna be able to tell? How can you figure out outside of your return on your investment? Because I think there's a lot of stuff, I think especially with Facebook and with Instagram, there's a lot more brand awareness going on there than actual points of sale, you know what I mean, or actual like like, so it's kind of, I think it's really kind of a labyrinth there, how to be able to analyze that and to tell how you're doing well or how you're not doing well.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously your spend, and then your spend is going to be monitored against how many clicks and how many views and how many impressions you're getting. Obviously, you want the impressions and views to be high, but if they don't turn into sales, or they don't turn into sales that are growing month after month after month, then you would start to be trending in a path that I would say that is sort of troubling, because you're spending all this money and you're getting the impressions, but no one's buying it. And then if you start trending, if your revenue starts trending down, that's a troubling sign. But if it's trending up, it's gaining a little bit of momentum, that's a good thing. But it really does come down to, are these dollars turning into sales at the end of the day, and are those sales trending up, and is there other marketing efforts that are going in behind the scenes because of the transaction, the momentum you're gaining from your online marketing campaign. So as soon as you start gaining a little traction there, that's where all the other variables come into play, where word of mouth and viral and all the other sort of things that start to contribute to gravy sales, as you might call it, because it's not directly correlated to your spend, but you get traction outside of that because you're building a network from your network.
No, I think I've launched a number of campaigns, and I've watched it for like, even for like I've got one running right now, and I even the last couple of days I've just been sort of like starting these things and having kind of killing them, because like the actual ad spend on per click was like through the roof. And it's like, so how long do you think, what's a reasonable amount of time one should be willing to commit to a campaign to see any action, to see any, I guess, to get any real results and to get any kind of like, actual data that they can use to be able to build something?
Well, I think it depends on how much you really believe in your marketing campaign. Like, if you've defined your end user really well, and you've segmented it really well, and you've determined the geography really well, and you're starting to get the clicks, but they might be a slow switcher from another product, or it's just taking time for the ultimate user to, to ultimately buy the product. That could take a while, but if you're really confident in that, maybe give it a few months. But if you're not very confident and you're just throwing money at the wall and hoping it's going to work, but you're clearly not seeing the clicks and you're not seeing the impressions and you're not seeing any traction on sales, then I would not be wasting a whole bunch of money at that. I would be focusing my money more on defining my market and defining my end user and trying to drill down into a really logical marketing plan, as opposed to spending money and hoping it works.
I think that's what a lot of people end up having to do too, though. Is like, it's kind of a terrifying thing when you and how vulnerable these ads are, in the sense that you're kind of throwing it out there. I've got negative comments on my ads too that I had to go back in and delete, and I realized quickly that I was marketing to absolutely the wrong people, though. And it was like, it's like, and finding that, I'm like, why am I getting negative responses? Oh, because this is not where I should be. And it's like you've walked into the wrong club and the whole place shuts down. You know what I mean?
And that's the utility of your spend. I mean, you can spend the money throwing it at the wall and hoping you gain traction in this marketing plan, or you can spend money really defining who your end user is and using research articles and going and conducting surveys and reading market publications, buying market publications, seeing where these end users are and how they're looking for your product, and spend money there up front, as opposed to wasting money at a campaign that's not going to have any return on your investment at all. And I think it's hard to do. To ads are so easy to run these days, and it's so tempting to say, I'm going to spend $300 on a Facebook ad and I'm going to see if it works. And if not, well, it was $200 or $100 or $300, and I'll try something else. And I think and then the other side of the argument is, I would have to spend, $500 or $600 on really defining my end user and what my consumer wants and what my consumer needs and why they want it and how they're going to go and consume it and when and why they're going to consume it. If you spend the money there, it helps figure out how you're going to market it, as opposed to just wasting the money up front and trying to throw darts at a wall to get hopefully the right marketing strategy through trial.
Yeah. I think that this is like, it's such a tricky game, though, because like you're constantly, I mean, and I think that there's so many people in there's so many different ways. And like I think that Facebook is a funny beast, because as soon as you start diving into whatever you're looking for, it just starts feeding you more and more of it, and this is like why so you start looking at how the algorithm, and how the machine reacts to you and what it does to you, and what it's doing to your own ad, and who that's being served to is a really, I find it really, because I put stuff out that, sometimes it just takes off, and then, and then sometimes they just die. And it's like, it's such a strange and weird animal to do. And I find it's so I think that there's so many things that people are trying to struggle with in there.
You have to think that part of their marketing campaign is the end user is people who are paying for those ads, and their marketing campaign internally, you'd have to think, would be, we know that there is a tech savvy crowd of young entrepreneurs who think that they are able to use computers well enough and understand the principles of marketing well enough to go ahead and use a easy to use interface and spend $300. And Facebook is doing that brilliantly, because so many people are falling for it and spending marketing money and not really getting that many returns. Like you're saying, you've struggled just because it's so tempting to do it, and it's so easy to do it, that Facebook's marketing campaign on the functionality and the easy interface and the limited options that you can demographically select in any of your ad campaigns, just make it user friendly to operate. And everyone says, well, I can do this, and that's not going to be too hard. Let's go for it. And so they're using a fantastic marketing campaign to design a product to satisfy the end user, which is us, our needs and wants, because we are convinced that we can we can do it. And that's how we're going to consume it, is online and by ourselves and using our own, what we think is a very tech savvy and ready to play culture. And we are.
Well, I think, yeah, this is the thing. If like I was saying before, I think I mentioned that casino mentality regarding this kind of thing too. Is that I sometimes I just feel like I'm just pulling the thing and letting it go and hoping that it
Yeah.
works, right? But
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
but that's really the wrong strategy to take, right?
Yeah. I think that's just, it could work for sure. I mean, you could hit the right keywords and all of everything that you would do in a really great marketing plan, defining your end user and why your consumer wants this and how they want it and when they want it, and all of that stuff could be luckily summed up in that one casino pull, and you could nail it right away, without doing any of the due diligence behind what is required of a really great marketing plan. But it also most of the time doesn't pan out that way. I don't think.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think so that then come back down to that. I think you said it right there. What is, I mean, as best as you can define, what is a really great marketing plan? Because I see this a lot, and I don't, and I think I know, because I hear a lot of people bat this stuff around a lot. They talk about SEOs, they talk about click through rates, they talk about all of this stuff that shows up, and I'm like, okay, wait, what's the thing I need to be focusing on most? What's the one thing, the most important thing above? If you're going to take anything out of that, what would you say? This is the most important thing you should be looking at.
All right. I mean, I don't, as a finance expert like you, I don't build marketing plans. I build more like a business plan. So I would be, I'm more in the metrics of that. But from my experience,
well, forget it then. Jay, go
in
right
marketing,
back to
if I was to say something, it really is. It is at the end of the day, your end user. You have to define your end user, and you have to determine what satisfies your end users' wants and needs, and you have to really build the value of your product in that fashion. Like if you can't define the value that you're providing as a product because it meets this end user's wants and needs, and these are the target market that is going to consume that, then it's very hard to say that you've developed a marketing plan, because that's really in my mind, that's the fundamentals of it. My limited knowledge of marketing plans, but that's really my fundamentals of what goes into a solid marketing plan.
Well, and it's just as a business in general too. I think it really is. I think that was the one thing I mean, literally, because I'll say I'm specifically trying to sell books on the internet, which seems like a lot of people are trying to do right now. It's either they're selling books or they're selling courses. That's like, I mean, I think the course must be something that is, it's I think because there's the tools are available there to put it together. I'm not saying that it's easy to do. It seems like it's very consumable. So that's something that people have like jumped all over, and all of these are courses on being a better marketer or something like that too, right? So I found myself wondering, like I think going back to this, if it's a business plan, if it's marketing and anything like that too, it's like really coming down and defining who you're trying to sell it to, and who you're trying to where you're trying. I mean, the deliverables and everything like that too, but when you have a product, you need to know who wants to buy that. And I've been sitting here looking at now, like I know who my market is, I know where they buy it, and it's like really is kind of like defining. And I've been able to figure out one of the crazy things I didn't realize too, because I did think that what I was selling was like a young adult kind of a thing, but then I realized that most 15-year-olds don't have credit cards. They're not buying anything on the internet. So like, how does so you getting around that kind of stuff too? And so you think that we got to get the kids in on this, but the kids aren't even buying it too, right? So it's like, it's really interesting.
Yeah. And then you have to dedicate a little bit of the room in your write-up to please the parents, or to comfort the parents that your product is safe for their children, and it's something that they are willing to put their credit card into, and that's part of it too, because you're right, that's defining your end user, who the end user in this case is really the parent who is purchasing the book for the child. It might come through the child, but the end user is ultimately the one who's paying for the product.
I think that's really defining your audience again too, right? So okay, so if we're gonna close it off, I'm wondering what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they go into marketing? What are the biggest things that they would and then what if you had any kind of a thing somebody wanted to recommend if they're going to try and launch an online business? What would you recommend that they focus on first?
I, I'll say it again. I think really it is about defining your user, your ultimate consumer, and understanding what it is that you provide that satisfies their want or need, and what is your value proposition that allows you as a business to do that. And if you can clearly define that, then you know what your value proposition is and why they are going to ultimately consume it. And then you can start to look for patterns and reasons and seasonality or time or whatever that they start purchasing or consuming this product. And then ultimately, once you're starting the business, it's metrics are they seem daunting, but they're not that daunting. And I think it's just take a measured approach to it. Everyone understands the concept of revenue and everyone understands the concept of expenses. And if you start creating your own data and looking at it, you're going to be less intimidated by it. And it's really not that challenging to put together your own income statement as an entrepreneur and not be scared of the principle behind it, but just take a crack at it, and then have someone who knows a little bit more about it walk you through it. But don't be scared of it. Have a disciplined approach to it, and I think you'll be fine.
I think that's it too. Is I think that a lot of people, I mean, most of the people that try and, any of these could be an entrepreneur, are like really in that fall into that dreamer category. And literally, a lot of the time it's no, they had, I got this great idea, but a lot of people are intimidated by the numbers, but the numbers aren't your enemy though. Really, they're ultimately like even a negative, even something that tells you you're not doing well is very good information. It's like, okay, that's what I shouldn't be doing, and that's kind of like that was that experience I had before with marketing to the wrong people.
Yeah, exactly. That's documenting your marketing strategies and seeing the trends behind them, and then learning what not to do, as opposed to saying, convincing yourself that you're right, even though the numbers are telling you a different story.
That's right.
It's always, if you're going to take the disciplined approach and document it and analyze it, the numbers aren't the final answer. There's always a human element behind the numbers, and you can rationalize one way or the other based on a solid rationalization or a judgment call. But I don't think it's always a good idea to ignore the numbers in pursuit of a dream.
Absolutely, right. Like, and yeah, ultimately they're there to help you rather than to hinder it. It's like, no, we don't need this. We're just out there. We put it out there, and people are going to get it. It's never has worked that way, and it never will work that way, right? There's
yeah. I'm a believer that the numbers are there and they help you, and they don't have to be the final decision, but they're certainly there to help you. And if you ignore them or you rationalize them away because you're so convinced that you're right despite the numbers telling you a different story, then I think you have a problem.
Absolutely, right. So I think that there's this idea that I think there's just to flip it the other way. I think a lot of people now, that it seems like there's this absolutely like insane, like kind of, rationalization that we have to be completely indebted to that kind of stuff too. And I think that but numbers can be manipulated in so many ways to make the data set seem that it's not doing this thing or that thing either. So I think we're kind of caught, but you have to make a decision on your own to be able to come up with that. But I think they can guide you through it.
And if you are disciplined as a one-person entrepreneur, and you're putting in your own numbers about your click-through rates and your spend and your keywords, and then you start analyzing over time your dollars per click-through rates, and then the numbers won't lie, because you're putting it in yourself and you know what they are, and you can build a line chart that shows a trend of these keywords going one way and another keyword going the other way. And there could be an inverse relationship between dollars per spend, or there could be a productive relationship between the two. And the numbers won't lie, and they're not going to be the tell-all story, but they're certainly going to help you go down the right path.
Absolutely. Make those decisions to get you to get your product in front of the right people with the right eyes and presented in the right way. And that's kind of that's really
Exactly.
the key to it all, is to having the right product in front of the right people, presented in packaged together in a way that they're going to want to consume it. Right. So I think that's if that's the lesson at all, is knowing who buys your product at the end of the day. Because if you're sitting out there, if you have anything you're doing, you're plopping it in the middle of a market and saying, buy my stuff, but you're selling nuts and bolts and at the sewing craft fair, it's like you're in the wrong place, right?
That's right. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So yeah, there we go. So that, yeah, there it is. The numbers don't lie, but they're there to be your friend. Thanks again, Will Everett, for all your time, and all the best with your future endeavors.
You too. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, we'll be in touch.